The scent of high-octane fuel and old grease was a perfume Michael Vance had long since stopped noticing. It was the smell of work, of sweat, of a life built not with privilege but with calloused hands. Rain hammered the corrugated tin roof of his auto shop, Vance's vintage and performance, a relentless percussion to the symphony of his labor. Under the hood of a classic '67 Mustang, his hands moved with a practiced, almost meditative grace, diagnosing, repairing, coaxing life back into tired metal. He was a healer for broken machines, a skill he'd honed over 20 years. The wall clock, a relic from a gas station giveaway, blinked a tired 10:47 p.m., another 16-hour day. On his cluttered workbench, amidst a scatter of calibrated wrenches and spark plugs, sat two artifacts that seemed out of place. One was a faded photograph of a much younger Michael, his arms slung around the shoulders of his eccentric, wealthy uncle Alistair Croft. They stood before a monstrous, unfinished supercar in Alistair's private garage, both grinning with the unburdened joy of shared passion. The other was a thick, cream-colored envelope of expensive linen paper, addressed from the firm Blackwood & Associates, solicitors. The word urgent was stamped in severe black letters. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the same number. A text buzzed through, cutting through the shop's familiar hum. It was from his wife, Isabella. "We need to talk. Now. Come home." A cold knot tightened in his stomach. Things had been strained, brittle. Isabella's sighs had grown heavier, her criticism sharper. The carefully curated life she'd once seemed content with now felt like a cage to her. He drove home in silence, the old Ford's wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour, the rhythmic squeak a grim counterpoint to the dread building in his chest. Every light in their modest suburban home was blazing, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness outside. Isabella stood in the center of the living room, a vision of calculated elegance. She wore a stunning crimson dress he'd never seen before, its cut sharp and expensive. Her auburn hair was swept into an impeccable chignon, and the air around her was thick with the cloying scent of exclusive perfume. In her manicured hands, she held a single, stark manila envelope. Her eyes, usually so warm and teasing, were chips of flint. She began, her voice cold and level, each word a precisely aimed dagger. "I married a man with ambition, Michael, a man with fire in his belly. I did not marry myself to a lifetime of mediocrity, of smelling like engine oil and counting coupons." He flinched, reaching for words that crumbled to ash in his mouth. "Bella, the shop is finally turning a corner. The classic car market is picking up. Another 6 months, a year at most." Her laugh was a short, brittle sound, like glass breaking. "Your corner is a dead end, Michael. It always has been. You're a dreamer, a tinkerer. You're content with just getting by. With this." She gestured around the room with disgust. "This ordinary existence. I am not." She thrust the envelope at him. It struck his chest and fell to the floor, spilling its contents. Divorce papers. The words petitioner and respondent glared up at him. "You're a failure, Michael," she whispered, the venom in her voice more potent than any shout. "I can't waste my youth here anymore. You will never give me the life I deserve, and I absolutely refuse to die poor and forgotten beside you." Those were the last words Isabella Moreau whispered to her husband before the finality of the papers settled between them. She turned on her heel, a sound sharp and final. From down the hallway, Michael heard drawers yanking open, hangers scraping on the rod. Then a small, sleepy voice. "Mommy, where are you going?" Their 5-year-old son Leo stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, his Iron Man teddy bear clutched tightly under one arm. He was the one perfect thing they had built together. Isabella crouched, her expression softening for a fleeting second. She stood, peeling his small hands from her expensive dress. "Be good for Daddy, sweetheart. Mommy has to go." "Please don't go, Mommy. I want to come." Leo's lower lip trembled, tears welling in his big blue eyes. He grabbed at the fabric of her expensive dress. For a single heart-stopping moment, Michael saw a flicker of conflict in Isabella's eyes. Then it was gone, shuttered behind a wall of resolve. She stood, peeling his small hands from her dress. No, baby, not this time. She didn't look back. She rolled her suitcase through the living room, the wheels a judgmental rumble on the hardwood floor. Headlights cut through the rain-washed night, illuminating the front yard. A sleek black Mercedes Maybach, a car worth more than their house, slid to a silent stop at the curb. Its engine purred with the sound of unimaginable wealth. Through the tinted window, Michael could make out the silhouette of a man waiting inside. The rear door opened with a hushed, expensive thump. "Bella, at least tell me why." Michael's voice was raw, shredded by the surreal velocity of it all. "After 10 years? After Leo? Why like this?" She paused at the car door, her profile etched against the interior light. "Because I deserve better than discount stores and charity auctions where we're the charity cases. Because I refuse to grow old in this monument to your inadequacy." She slid into the leather embrace of the Maybach. The door closed with a sound as soft and final as a coffin lid. Leo pressed his face against the screen door, his small body shaking with silent sobs as the car disappeared into the wet, consuming darkness. The house was suddenly terribly silent, holding its breath. The only sound was the ragged hitch of his son's breathing. Michael scooped Leo up, carried him to the couch, and held him as the quiet aftershocks of their world breaking apart rippled through the small boy's body. He whispered promises into his hair, promises of love, of constancy, of a future that, though different, would still be good. When Leo finally cried himself to sleep, Michael laid him gently in his bed, tucking the teddy bear close. He walked back into the living room, a ghost in his own home. His gaze fell on the scattered divorce papers, the photo of his Uncle Alistair, and the unopened envelope from Blackwood and Associates. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over the voicemail notification. He pressed play. "Mr. Vance, this is Eleanor Blackwood. We must speak with utmost urgency regarding the estate of your uncle, Alistair Croft. Please contact us first thing tomorrow morning. The matter is rather significant." Estate? Alistair? Michael hadn't spoken to his reclusive, brilliant uncle in nearly a decade, not since a fierce argument over the direction of the family's legacy. Alistair had believed in building things with your hands. Michael's father, Alistair's brother, had believed in leveraging assets. The fallout had been permanent. He looked at the unopened envelope, at his sleeping son, and the front door where the rain had left small glittering puddles like a trail of unspent tears. He had just lost the woman he loved, the future he'd envisioned. He felt hollowed out, a failure, just as she'd said. What he could not possibly know was that fate, meticulous and utterly unsentimental, had already begun to recalibrate the scales of his life. On the other side, a counterweight of unimaginable mass was being placed. Some people leave for a luxury car. Some stay for a love that can't be repossessed. The clock ticked past midnight, and the world, without any fanfare, turned over into a new day. Morning arrived. Too bright and too quiet. Leo's teddy bear lay abandoned on the rug, a silent witness to the previous night's trauma. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp, but the house still held the metallic tang of upheaval. Michael moved through the motions on autopilot, brewing coffee he didn't drink, staring at the divorce papers, watching the milk soften Leo's cereal into a soggy mess. "Is Mommy going to call today?" Leo asked, his spoon hovering midair. The question was a knife to Michael's heart. "I don't know, buddy," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "but I promise you this, you will never, ever go to sleep wondering if you are loved, not for a single night. That's a promise." He dressed Leo, dropped him off at kindergarten with a hug that lasted several heartbeats too long, and then drove downtown, a man heading to an appointment he didn't understand. The offices of Blackwood and Associates were a world away from his garage, all hushed tones, polished mahogany, and walls lined with legal volumes and tasteful art. Eleanor Blackwood was a woman in her 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of serene competence. "Mr. Vance, thank you for coming. Please, Accept my condolences on the loss of your uncle, Alistair Croft. He spoke of you often. Loss? I hadn't seen him in years. We weren't close. Nevertheless, you were his sole heir. She slid a heavy leather-bound portfolio across the immense desk. Alistair passed 3 weeks ago. His will is quite explicit and rather unconventional. The numbers on the statement looked like a fiction, a typo. Oil and gas royalties? Commercial real estate holdings spanning 3 continents? A sprawling investment portfolio? A private equity fund? As of the market close yesterday, Miss Blackwood said, her voice perfectly calm, the total value of the estate is approximately $650 million. The air left Michael's lungs. He blinked, certain he was having a stress-induced hallucination. There must be a mistake, a decimal point in the wrong place. There is no mistake, Mr. Vance. However, there is a condition, a rather unusual one. She produced a single sheet of paper covered in Alistair's familiar spidery handwriting. Your uncle was a peculiar man. He believed that sudden wealth could reveal a man's true character or utterly destroy it. He stipulated that the inheritance remain entirely confidential for a period of 12 months from the date of probate. No one can know, not the public, not your friends, not even your family. He wanted you to prove your spine, as he put it, before the world ever knew your name. Michael took the letter, his hands trembling slightly. Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're likely furious with me for the radio silence. Don't be. I was giving you the space to become your own man, not the man your father wanted, or the man I wanted, but the man you choose to be. This money is a loud friend and a cruel master. It amplifies who you already are. Be a better man than I was. Build something that outlives you. Choose people who choose you, not your bank account. And for God's sake, don't let it kill the mechanic in you. That's the best part. Your uncle, Alistair. A strange calm settled over Michael. The shock was immense, but Alistair's words, so characteristically blunt, provided an anchor. This wasn't a lottery win. It was a test, a responsibility. He signed the mountain of documents, his hand steady. Outside, the city gleamed under the morning sun. He got into his old Ford, sat in the driver's seat, and simply breathed for what felt like the first time since the Maybach's taillights had vanished. That week, he made quiet, deliberate moves. He met with Miss Blackwood and a discreet financial team she recommended. He established a series of holding companies with deliberately opaque names. He paid 2 years' rent on the house in advance. He set up a college fund for Leo so vast it would cover postgraduate studies on Mars. He found a highly recommended child therapist for his son to help him navigate the abandonment. He did not call Isabella. The divorce machinery ground on without his participation. He was served papers at the shop. He didn't contest them. He wouldn't fight for someone who had made her choice so absolutely. 45 days later, the divorce was finalized by default. He was granted primary custody. Isabella was offered supervised visitation. She never once exercised it. At night, after reading to Leo and tucking him in, Michael would sit at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. He sketched out ideas not for yachts or jets, but for his shop, a second location, a proper website, profit sharing for his 2 loyal mechanics, Carlos and Dave, who had stuck by him through thin and thinner. He pinned Alistair's letter above his workbench at home, a constant reminder of the man he wanted to become. 1,000 miles away in a glittering Miami high-rise, Isabella Moreau stepped out onto a vast balcony overlooking the turquoise expanse of Biscayne Bay. The man from the Maybach, Julian Thorne, handed her a flute of chilled Dom Perignon. Julian was handsome, charming, and immensely wealthy from a family-owned construction empire. He was amused by Isabella's hunger, her sharp edges, her desperate desire to escape her past. She posted pictures of sun-drenched pools, diamond bracelets, and 5-star meals to her social media, a triumphant middle finger to everyone back in her old life who had pitied her.
She told herself the occasional pang of guilt was just the price of admission to a better world. The memory of Leo's tear-streaked face was a ghost she drowned in champagne and luxury. Back in his small room, Leo was learning a different kind of lesson. "We don't quit on each other," Michael told him as they worked on a complex Lego spaceship together. "Engines stall. People have bad days, but we don't quit." On the refrigerator, a magnet held a kindergarten drawing, 3 stick figures under a smiling sun. One of the figures was conspicuously absent now, but the sun, at Leo's insistence, still smiled. The year of silence began. For Michael, the confidentiality clause wasn't a shackle, it was a shield. It gave him space to learn, to plan, to grieve and to grow without the distorting lens of wealth. He kept driving the old Ford. He patched the roof himself. He expanded Vance's vintage and performance with quiet efficiency. A second location opened under a new business name, then a third. He invested in the best equipment, paid his mechanics far above market rate, and instituted a proper health insurance plan. The rumor mill in the local business community began to churn. "That Vance guy, he's got backing now, treats his people right." He hired a retired razor-sharp CFO named Arthur Finch, who taught him to think like a steward of capital, not just an earner of it. Together, they began strategically deploying Alistair's fortune. They bought undervalued land along proposed highway expansions. They took silent minority stakes in unsexy but vital tech startups, a company that made logistics software for truckers, another that developed more efficient engine diagnostics.
Michael would study term sheets after putting Leo to bed, often calling Arthur with questions late into the night. He was determined to understand the tools he now wielded. On Sundays, he and Leo had a standing date to grill in their small backyard. They planted a vegetable garden and named a persistent squirrel that stole their tomatoes Uncle Al. At bedtime, when Leo's eyes would get a distant, sad look, Michael was always honest. "Mom made a choice, Leo. It was a hurtful one, and it wasn't about you, it was about her. We make our own choices. We choose to be kind. We choose to be strong. We choose to not give up." He put his money where his mouth was. In the 9th month of his secret, he established the Croft Vance Foundation for Single Parents, funded anonymously through one of his holding companies. It provided pro bono legal aid, emergency housing grants, and childcare subsidies for struggling fathers and mothers. In Miami, the glitter began to tarnish. Julian's construction empire was built on a foundation of debt and risky leverage. Payments started to lag. Creditors began to call. Isabella noticed Julian's smiles become tighter, his phone calls more abrupt. She kept up the facade on social media, but a note of desperation began to creep into her captions. The ache she thought she'd left behind began to morph into a new, more sophisticated kind of anxiety. As the 12-month mark of confidentiality approached, Eleanor Blackwood summoned Michael back to her office. "The provision expires next week," she informed him. "The decision on how you step into the public eye is yours to make." Michael's answer was immediate. "I don't want a spotlight, but if it finds me, I'll use it for something bigger than myself." The spotlight found him sooner than expected. One of the unsexy startups he'd invested in, the logistics software company, landed a massive federal contract. Its valuation skyrocketed overnight, pushing Michael's personal net worth, on paper, well past the billion-dollar mark. The financial press, always hungry for a new name, took notice. "Mystery backer of Logipore," the headlines read. Michael stayed resolutely out of view, but his decisions grew bolder. He used a fraction of his newfound liquidity to purchase a shuttered technical college campus. He poured millions into renovating it, creating the Croft Vance Institute of Trades and Technology, a tuition-free vocational school for veterans, single parents, and at-risk youth. At home, Leo, now 7, was trying to assemble a miniature go-kart engine, his tongue poked out in concentration. "Dad?" he asked without looking up. "Do you ever think you'll get married again?" "Maybe, if the right person comes along. For both of us. Not just for me." The right person was closer than he knew, though their paths had not yet crossed. She would come into his life not in a ballroom, but in a courthouse hallway, a fierce, compassionate legal aid attorney named Clara Rossi fighting for a father who'd lost his job for staying home with a sick child. But that was still in the future. In Miami, Julian Thorne's financial house of cards collapsed with spectacular speed. Federal subpoenas arrived. Assets were frozen. Isabella came home one afternoon to find the penthouse door ajar. Inside, drawers were emptied. Julian's expensive watches and cufflinks were gone. On the marble kitchen island was a single scribbled note: "Don't try to find me." The bubble had burst. The friend she'd made evaporated. Calls went straight to voicemail. The one woman who did answer, a socialite she'd considered a close confidant, said simply, "I told you that boy needed his mother, Isabella. Some things you can't buy back," before the line went dead. 2 years bled into 3. Michael's empire grew quietly but solidly. His auto shop chain became a regional powerhouse, known for its fair practices and excellent training. The institute graduated its first class to great local acclaim. He met Clara Rossi at a legal aid clinic his foundation funded. She was brilliant, kind, and entirely unimpressed by wealth because she didn't know he had any. She fell in love with the mechanic, the father, the man, long before she ever learned about the billionaire. 2 years after that, on a windswept hill overlooking the city, they were married. Leo, now 10, stood proudly between them, holding the rings. Michael's work continued to expand. His foundation built on-site daycare centers at partner factories and businesses, understanding that true support meant solving practical problems.
Back in Miami, Isabella's life had shrunk to a single rented room. The pawn shops knew her by name. On a cracked phone screen, she scrolled through news alerts she set up for her old city, a masochistic habit she couldn't break. And then she saw it. The headline was simple. Local philanthropist Michael Vance pledges $150 million to Youth STEM Initiative. There was a picture. Michael, standing taller and more confident than she'd ever seen him. Beside him was a handsome, dark-haired woman, Clara, her hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a boy Isabella barely recognized. Her son, Leo, happy, healthy, loved. The caption below the photo contained a word that sucked the air from her lungs: billionaire philanthropist Michael Vance and his family. The word billionaire echoed in the hollowed-out chambers of her heart. She remembered the crimson dress, the slammed door, the feel of Leo's small hands clutching her skirt. She remembered her own words: "You will never give me the life I deserve." A desperate, crazy plan formed in her mind. It was her only card left to play. She scraped together every last dollar she had for a one-way bus ticket back to the city she'd sworn she'd never return to. The day of the press conference was bright and clear. Michael had decided to plant his flag. He was announcing a massive partnership with the city's school system, funding robotics labs, after-school programs, and teacher grants. It required him to step into the light. At the event, surrounded by cheering children and grateful community leaders, he felt a sense of purpose that no amount of money could buy. He saw Leo in the crowd, beaming with pride, and Clara giving him a reassuring nod. He was no longer the man Isabella had left. He was the man Alistair had believed he could become. That evening, as Michael helped Leo with his homework and Clara stirred a pot of pasta on the stove, his phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text message. "Michael, it's Isabella. I'm in the city. I need to see you, please. It's about Leo." He stared at the screen, a lifetime of emotions threatening to surface. He showed the text to Clara, whose expression hardened with protective instinct. He didn't reply. An hour later, a second text came. "I'm outside." The Vance family home was no longer the small house on the suburban street. It was a beautiful modern estate on several wooded acres designed for privacy and peace, not for show. Security was discreet but ever present, a necessity of his new life.
A taxi was idling at the end of the long driveway near the iron security gate. Isabella stepped out. The years had not been kind. She was thin, her expensive clothes replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting jacket. Her face was etched with lines of hardship and regret. She looked small and brittle. The intercom at the gate crackled to life. "State your name and business." "It's Isabella," she said, her voice trembling. "Isabella Vance. I was his wife. I'm Leo's mother." There was a long pause. Then, not the hum of the gate opening, but the sight of Michael walking down the driveway alone. He stopped a few feet short of the iron bars. A moment later, Clara and Leo appeared on the porch, standing together, a united front. "Hello, Isabella," Michael said, his voice calm, devoid of malice but also of warmth. She gripped the strap of her worn purse. "I made a mistake, Michael. A terrible, terrible mistake. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what matters. Please, for Leo's sake?" "Don't," Michael interrupted, his voice soft but firm, carrying a weight of authority that was new. "Don't use his name as a bargaining chip. You made a choice. We have lived with the consequences of that choice. We've built a good life." She pressed her forehead against the cold iron bars. "I don't want your money. I swear I don't. I just want a chance to be his mother again. I want to apologize to him." Leo took a step forward from the porch. At 10 years old, he possessed a quiet maturity. He said, "I remember you. You're the one who left. Clara is my mom now." The words were a physical blow. Isabella crumbled, sinking to her knees on the gravel. "I deserve that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I deserve so much worse." "Punishing you isn't my job, Isabella. Protecting my family is." He nodded to a security guard who had materialized silently nearby. "You will not be harassed, you will not be publicly shamed, but you will not be let in." She looked up, a flash of her old anger surfacing before dying just as quickly. "Do you feel nothing? No satisfaction in seeing me like this?" "I feel a lot of things. Sadness for the woman I once loved, gratitude for the man her leaving forced me to become, immense pride in my son, and a deep, abiding love for my wife. But most of all, I feel relief. Relief that the person who valued me the least no longer gets to decide what I'm worth." The security guard approached her, not unkindly. "Ma'am, we can call you a cab. Where would you like to go?" She stared past Michael at Clara, looking for a shred of sympathy, of weakness she could exploit. She found none in her gaze, only a calm, unshakable love for the boy beside her and a fierce loyalty to the man she'd married. That, more than the mansion or the security, was what finally broke her. She had traded a love that was real for a fantasy that was false. "Michael, please," she tried one last time, her voice a broken whisper. "There is room in my heart for forgiveness, Isabella, but it's full of the people who stood by me, the people who chose me. There's no vacancy left." The guard helped her up and opened the taxi door. She got in without another word, the picture of utter defeat. The car pulled away, disappearing down the tree-lined road. Michael turned and walked back to the porch. He put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "You okay, champ?" Leo nodded, the serious moment passing, allowing him to be a kid again. "Yeah, can we finish the go-kart engine now?" Clara smiled, her arm slipping around Michael's waist. "Wash your hands first." Michael paused for a moment, looking back down the empty driveway.
He felt no triumph, no glee, only the quiet, solid closure of a door, finally, irrevocably shut. Some stories don't need revenge. They simply need clarity. He turned his back on the past and walked inside with his family. The house was filled with the smell of garlic bread and the sound of laughter. True wealth, he knew now, wasn't measured in bank statements or real estate portfolios. It was measured in the quiet moments of peace, in the love of the people who stayed through the storm, and in the unwavering knowledge that he had built a life not just of success, but of significance. Family first, always. The rest was just noise.